What we're going to talk about next is how do you connect all your components to your wires. There's many different ways to do this. You can use the butt connectors that have heat shrink on them already. You can use raw butt connectors. You can use non-heat shrink butt connectors. Personally, I like the just the raw butt connectors, and then putting your own heat shrink on. But then there's also some quick connectors, and we can give you a link to where to find these guys. We use these because they're fast, and we can put our electrical systems together quickly, but they do cost a little bit more. But this, I'll show you guys, a easy, more expensive way, fast, and then a little bit slower but much cheaper way to do this as well. Here we have a quick connector, and this is just a 2-wire. It's pretty simple stuff. You open these guys right up, strip your wire, plug them right in there, and then snap them together. And then you're gonna wanna give the wire a good tug, make sure it's not gonna slip out, and then there you have it. The thing about these though, is you definitely want to make sure they're not completely and totally buried. With a lot of electrical connections, you wanna make sure you have access to them. You don't wanna put something completely and totally buried behind a wall. All of these cables, this is one cable from this end all the way to the electrical box. There's no connections that we can't get to after everything is put up. So remember that. If you've got to cut a wire and splice a wire, sometimes it's best to just get a new wire and then use that wire somewhere else, somewhere where you don't need such a long piece of wire. But making sure that you have nice connections that are accessible after everything is put together, that's important as well. So another way to do this is an insulated butt connector. Now these are kind of nice because they already have your heat shrink on the butt connector. So you can see there's metal in the middle of this guy and then a little crimp right there. So you trim your wires up, you strip them, you stick them on the inside, and then you crimp on either side of these, and then you get a lighter or a heat gun. Heat gun is preferable. You don't, keep the fire out of your van. And then you shrink these guys down so that way your wire is insulated. These are a little bit more expensive than your typical, non-insulated butt connector, but it's also pretty easy and pretty fast. This is a non-insulated butt connector. This is my favorite one. Mostly they're cheap and they're super strong. You have your little groove right here in the middle. So that's the length of how long you want to strip your wire. You pinch these guys on there. Only thing is you also have to put a piece of heat shrink over those. I'll demonstrate the heat shrinking of these butt connectors, but you have a lot of options with these things, a lot of different sizes that you might not be able to find with the heat shrink, the ones that already have the heat shrink on them, the insulated ones. So that's a smaller one. This one's a little bit bigger. So you have all these different sizes to choose from. And what's really cool about these two, it's easy to find step downs. So you can see this is for a 16 gauge to an 18 gauge. And you could tell by the little blue streaks. So maybe you're running 14 or 16 gauge wire, and then your component requires 18 gauge. So that way you can step it down and you can, use 2 different size wires. You don't have to use all this tiny, tiny wire. Remember when I said about voltage drop? So your component might have a small wire, but you need to run a bigger wire to it. Like you have all this power and you need to distribute it everywhere. So you need to use a bigger wire to go into this smaller wire. So never smaller wire into a bigger wire, always bigger wire into a smaller wire. And when in doubt, step the wire size up. That's the safest way to go about it. Never undergauge your wire. I like these kind of electrical pliers. They're simple. They have a place to cut all your wires. They have all your gauges. So that way where to properly strip your wire. We want to strip our wire and have enough wire coming out that can go into our little quick connect. So again, find our little 18 gauge, give it a pinch, and then pull it out. Now, I think it's important to grab it and just spin it. And I like the whole righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so that way, if your butt connector is tight, you can spin it on. So with the quick connects, this is a very, very simple way to do your wiring. All you need to do is pop open these levers, and then you would insert your wires all the way until they're fully seated, and then just shut them. And then you're gonna wanna give them a pull, make sure they're not coming out. Another thing you wanna look for is that the insulation is all the way inside the connector. You don't want your exposed wires way up here, because you're kind of defeating the purpose of protecting your wire and insulating the wire properly. So make sure the spliced end is all the way inside, because if these guys connect and they touch, you're gonna blow your fuse. And if you ever need to take this off, super easy, open those up, and there you have it. So with this, you're gonna wanna do this with every single wire in the van. And the strip lengths are important. You want more wire for your quick connects, and you want less wire for your non-insulated or your insulated butt connectors. And I'll show you guys how we do that here in a quick sec. I'm gonna show you guys how to install one of these guys on a 12 gauge wire. So it's gonna be the same thing that we did with the quick connects, only this is less of a quick connect, and it's more permanent. If you install one of these things and it's not quite right, you do have to clip it down and your wire will get shorter. So keep that in mind. One thing I like to do is try to make sure my wires are even before. So get them as close as you can, so that way, every once in a while, it does matter. I have some crazy lengths, but nice and even. So this is, again, gonna be important with how much you strip it. And a good way to tell is to that's your little stop point. That's about as far as the wire can go. So we wanna trim about that much off. So we've got 12 gauge wire, put it in the 12 gauge slot, give it a pinch. Sometimes you need to spin it. And there you have it. So you can probably strip a little bit more than that, but as you can see, that is going to be fully seated and not leave any exposed wires. So again, give her a nice little spin, put your wire right in there, and there you have it. You see how there's just a tiny bit of exposed wire in there. That's nice. That's pretty much how you want it. So here on these pliers, you can see that we have the bare side and the insulated side. So it's important to crimp, bare non-insulated wire with the bare side, and the insulated side, crimp with this side. If you crimp insulated with the bare side, this little notch will tear your insulation, and then you kind of defeat the purpose of insulating your wires. So you want the little smooth section. That's why I like the bare. You get a really, really good bite with these things. You don't want to go too far down. So remember, this is where our wire's hanging out. I like to favor the end a little bit more, and then you just give it a good pinch. And you can see that's bent the butt connector. So now this thing is stuck. You want to grab this thing and give it a good pull, and really give it a good pull. If it pops off, you didn't squeeze hard enough. I like to give these things a nice hard squeeze. And so now you're good to go on this one. Always remember to put this guy on there. I can't tell you how many times I've crimped one of these guys and then crimped your other piece on, and then you have this bare piece of metal that you can't get your heat shrink on. So you want to slide that on there and then crimp your component onto the other side. So that way you can slide this over, you get a heat gun, lighter, small torch, and you can heat this up and it'll shrink and seal everything here. You're gonna wanna make sure your heat shrink is long enough because the idea here is to shrink it through here all the way to the other side of the component and protect this whole area from arcing, from grounding out. Your whole body of this van is a ground. So if you have some exposed metal here and it touches some exposed metal on the body of the van, it will blow the fuse and then your component will stop working. So make sure everything is well insulated. We use 2 different kinds of heat shrink when we do this. We'll use red for positive and black for negative. And it just helps with identifying stuff, say further down the line you need to troubleshoot. You can quickly identify what's what. You can also do that with the wire. All of our black wires will be grounds, and then all of our white wires will be positive. Another simple way to do it is to, with this 2-wire, just write on your wire and write further up the wire. So reading light, that's for your reading light. Like that's a great way to identify all your wires. But keep your stuff labeled and organized and situated so that way you don't have all this guesswork. You're not running a multimeter trying to figure out what's going where. Label all your wires. You'll thank me for it, I promise.